The best of Money Matters. The Big Story.
Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Hongbin Jeong. What began as a job ad for roles in Singapore has turned into a police probe with international links. A Singapore company, Changting Network Technology, is being investigated for allegedly luring job seekers to a resort in Cambodia, one connected to suspected scam operations. The Straits Times has uncovered new details about the company's operations, its connections to a Cambodian tycoon, and how job seekers were targeted. To help unpack what's known so far and how tech is fueling more sophisticated scams, joining us today is Aqil Hamzah, who is the journalist at the Straits Times. Hi, Aqil. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Hello there.
Thank you so much for joining us. Well, Aqil, the Singapore firm Changting Network Technology positions itself as a tech firm, and it has advertised various roles on local and overseas job search sites, with the purported roles supposedly based in Singapore. Now, who is this Singapore firm, and what exactly were they offering job seekers, and how did the Cambodian Resort come into the picture?
Okay, so this Singapore firm actually was registered here in 2019. So it's actually been operating in Singapore shores for 6 years already. And they claim that they deal in technology. So on their website, they say that they do things like artificial intelligence, cloud computing, things like that. And when they were scouting for job seekers on these job portals, so on Singapore's end, what they did was they actually put up an ad on My Careers Future looking for a digital advertising manager, whereas for the overseas job portals, from what I understand, they've been trying to recruit customer service executives who would actually be based in Singapore and liaise with people from around the region, people who they claim were their clients, basically, across Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, things like that. And this Cambodian resort, so what actually happened was during the interview process, the hiring manager from the company would tell you that you have to go for training in Cambodia for 3 months at least for them to find out if you're a good fit for the company. And while he was originally really vague about the role that you would perform in Cambodia, eventually in a second interview done with his supervisors, allegedly, they said that in Cambodia we'd be working at this casino. It would be a perfectly legal job. And although he didn't specify much, it basically, with the address that was given, it ties back to Koh Kong Resort, which is a sanctioned site according to the U.S. Treasury Department.
Okay. Well, let's talk more about that. I mean, further checks by ST revealed that Koh Kong Resort is owned or controlled by Cambodian businessman La Yong Phat. Who exactly is La Yong Phat?
Okay, so La Yong Phat is actually the owner of a conglomerate in Cambodia known as LYP Group. And they deal in multiple businesses. So some things are things like tobacco, casinos, things like that. Other than that, it just seems like he's a very influential figure in Cambodia with lots of businesses. But the U.S. again had sanctioned him in September 2024, alleging that he was basically abusing trafficked workers in scam centers. And they identified the various resorts and casinos that he owned as locations where these victims were being housed.
Okay. Well, the Straits Times looked into the firm after a foreigner asked in a September 6th post online if the company was legitimate. What exactly did the foreigner post online? What did he go through?
So it was actually a Reddit post on Singapore jobs, if I remember correctly. And he was asking about Changting Network Technology because he had applied for the job after seeing an ad on an overseas portal. And after going through the interview, that's when things became slightly suspicious for him because they told him about the training stint in Cambodia. So he had asked online about whether people had heard of this company, whether it was legitimate, and if they had any advice, basically. So from that post, when I communicated with him directly, I understood that he had his reservations after being told that he would be sent to Cambodia for training because his assumption was that he would actually be moving to Singapore. But there was no attempt to get him to give his personal details to prepare a work visa for him here, which is why he felt really hesitant about going ahead with the job offer.
Okay. Well, I mean, I believe he eventually got the job offer, but he didn't sign the contract. Well, I also know that ST submitted a fake resume to the same hiring manager posing as a foreign job seeker. How did that go about, and what did you uncover?
So I actually asked the foreigner to help put me in touch with the hiring manager. So he introduced me as his friend from his hometown, things like that. So that gave my cover story a lot more credibility. And when I was connected to this hiring manager, the first thing I did was to basically just liaise with him and tell him that I was looking for a job and I heard that his company had an opening. So he asked me for my CV, and what I did was I actually went to ChatGPT to generate a fake one. And then I had to translate it to Mandarin because the hiring manager only spoke Mandarin and he wanted a Mandarin CV basically. So after I gave it to him, within an hour actually, like after he reviewed it, he asked me if I was free for a phone interview. So one of my colleagues actually helped me out with that. And during that phone interview, the hiring manager explained things like the pay package that they were willing to offer, as well as the job scope and basically the expectations that they would have if I was hired. So after that phone interview, I think in less than 15 minutes after that, he immediately told me that the company was interested and they asked for my email address for them to send an offer letter. And the following day when they sent an offer letter, they gave me a deadline to sign it by, but I managed to extend it by coming up with excuses. And during that period of time, I was pretty much just trying to find out as much as I could about the company to see if, there were any other clues that I could glean.
Well, there was also another job listing by Changting Network Technology on My Careers Future job portal for a digital advertising manager. Tell us more about this one.
Okay, so this one, I chanced upon this when I was actually looking up the company. So doing things like internet searches and whatnot. And during one of my internet searches, I noticed this job ad on My Careers Future. So Changting Network Technology, they were looking for a digital advertising manager, and they were willing to pay $6,000 to $10,000 a month for 2 years of relevant experience. So the application process would require me to use SingPass to fill up my personal particulars, but because I didn't want them to know who I actually was, I actually, using the persona of that foreign national who had applied earlier, I told the hiring manager that I had a friend in Singapore who was interested. So after giving another completely fabricated CV, I told them that I couldn't really speak Mandarin, so they actually put me in touch with someone from Singapore using a Singapore phone number who conducted the interview with me. So during that interview, I remember asking them about what exactly they wanted me to advertise, and they told me that they were working on a new project that would function sort of like a Craigslist of sorts. But somehow after that, there was no mention of going overseas for training or anything. They told me I'll be based in Singapore and report to the office 5 days a week. But after that call, that person actually messaged me to tell me that I would have to go overseas for, at the very least, a month to do some training.
Okay. Well, I mean, it looks like you guys did a very big deep dive onto this company. But what more inconsistencies did you find about Changting when you took a deeper dive into the firm?
I think a lot of the inconsistencies that were found were actually done through digital forensics. So a lot of clues were gleaned from its website, which was only created sometime in July this year. And looking at the contact information of the website, for example, there were a lot of contradictions. So the address listed on the website, it doesn't match the actual address of the office, which we had visited. And then even the phone numbers that were listed on the website, they were just dead ends, their emails as well. So it really begs the question, like, what sort of company is this where their contact information is just fraudulent? It's not even leading anywhere. So those clues had also helped to paint this picture that this company isn't exactly what they claim to be.
Right. The police are now looking into this firm. What's the current state of the police investigation here? Do we know how many people may have been potentially affected by this?
At this stage, the police are still investigating, so it's very hard for us to tell this current status. As to how many people have been potentially affected, that is unclear at this point as well. All I know is that with the job listing on My Careers Future, based on the number of applicants, there were about 14 to 15 of them. But I doubt that anyone might have taken that opportunity, although we can't say for sure, actually.
Right. Are there still any unanswered questions or uncertainties about this case?
Oh, there definitely are. There's questions about who the director of this company is, actually. So he's a Chinese national, and interestingly enough, his address that was registered, like his home address, originally it was actually a commercial unit, and late last month it was switched to a condominium in the east of Singapore. So that is one big question. Another question, again, is really about how there's been so much oversight, basically, for a company that seems to be fraudulent to actually be able to put up job listings on portals in Singapore that are meant for legitimate companies.
Okay. Well, speaking of scams, criminal syndicates are tapping on AI to lure victims as well, including those who may end up being trafficked to work at scam centers. Now, Aqil, you recently spoke to Stephanie Barud, who is a criminal intelligence analyst in Interpol's Human Trafficking and Smuggling of Migrants unit. How exactly are scam syndicates using AI tools, according to Stephanie?
So Stephanie told me that scam syndicates are using AI tools primarily to actually lure victims right now. So for them to recruit victims to work as scammers as well, they're using these AI tools to generate online ads for jobs, for example. So the job ads that you see online right now today, promising, high salaries in exotic locations, they're a lot more sophisticated compared to back then when criminals didn't have access to AI, and thus you would see things like spelling mistakes more often. On the other hand, these people, when they're trafficked into these scam centers, they're now also being forced to use AI to communicate to other potential victims. So for instance, in a love scam that's being perpetuated, for example, they would use AI to come up with lines for them to use on their victims. And if the victims speak a language that they themselves don't speak, they can just use AI to translate it and then use AI again to come up with lines in that person's language.
Right. I mean, AI is becoming sophisticated and it's getting easier for these scammers to use. So how widespread is this use of AI by crime syndicates? Is this becoming a broader trend?
So based on Interpol's observations, it does look like AI is becoming much more widespread in use by criminal syndicates. However, at this point, it's still something that's very nascent and they're still tracking it. They're not fully aware of the full extent that criminal syndicates are tapping on AI, but they do notice this increasing trend and they do warn that it could really be used across all levels of scamming.
Okay. Well, then how does this now increase the complexity and challenges associated with, detecting and disrupting these activities for law enforcement agencies?
I think it makes a lot of what was previously easy to detect scams a lot more harder to determine. So, for instance, what Stephanie told me was that Interpol actually, when this trend of using job ads to lure people, to lure victims, started around 2022, Interpol actually analyzed the different job ads and they would notice certain trends, actually. So some of the trends include things like the locations of the jobs. So they would tell unsuspecting victims that these jobs would be based in Cambodia or Myanmar, locations where scam centers are known to be located in. But using AI right now, a lot of these job ads are able to mask the reality. So instead of saying that the job will be based in Cambodia or Myanmar, they'll instead tell you another location, perhaps Vietnam, for example. And because of that, it becomes a lot harder for law enforcement to basically detect if these job ads are legitimate or not, because AI has made it a lot harder to tell what is legitimate versus what is fraudulent.
Based on your conversation with Stephanie, what is Interpol doing in response? What strategies or operations are being deployed?
So at this point, I understand that Interpol has issued this thing called a purple notice. So a purple notice is when they alert member countries that there's a new modus operandi in existence, and basically the use of AI to supplement scams to make them much more realistic sounding, realistic looking. It's something that Interpol has noted in their annual crime report this year. And it's something that they've been trying to warn member countries to be very cognizant about, because criminal syndicates are pretty much evolving constantly. They're pumping a lot of money and investment into these scam centers because these are the things that are raking in money. So because of that, law enforcement agencies as well have to pretty much, adjust and keep up with the times. They can't just rest on their laurels and expect criminal syndicates to just carry on as usual, because they'll constantly be tapping new technologies to be able to evolve and grow their businesses.
Definitely. So what advice is Interpol, giving to individuals and organizations to protect themselves from AI-enhanced scams and trafficking?
I think at the end of the day, a lot of the things that people can actually do is really practice due diligence. So you may not necessarily be able to tell if something is AI generated or not, but what you can do is take that extra time to actually do some research into things. So for instance, if you're looking for a job and you don't know if this job advertisement is legitimate or not, what you can actually do is do some background research into the company, try to find out if there are any reviews about that company by former employees on portals like Glassdoor or LinkedIn. Try to find their social media profiles, their internet presence basically, to determine for yourself if this looks trustworthy enough. And at the end of the day, while AI-enhanced scams are a thing, I would say that, pretty much people have to be able to research for themselves, because AI itself, while it's done so much, revolutionize a lot of things, there are still gaps that it can't fill. And I believe that human curiosity can overcome that gap.
Definitely. Well, some great insights from you there. Thank you so much, Aqil, for joining me today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was Aqil Hamzah, journalist at the Straits Times. Now, if you want to read more about the recent case, how the firm misled job seekers with Singapore-based roles that were actually in a sanctioned Cambodian site, you may read it on the Straits Times. It's titled, Police Looking into Singapore Firm Luring Job Seekers to Scam-Linked Cambodian Resort. Also, you can catch up on more details on how criminal syndicates are tapping on AI to lure victims. Also on the Straits Times, it's titled Criminal Syndicates Tapping AI to Improve Scams, Human Trafficking, Interpol. This has been The Big Story with me, Hongbin Jeong.
Money FM 89.3